This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 102. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast for the 9th of July 2008. Nice to have you with us. Having a solid project management methodology that everyone in your organization follows is one of the most basic building blocks that any company really needs. Jason Westland from mpmm.com is joining us on the program today to discuss how to first select and then also implement a project management methodology that fits your company needs and also your corporate culture. Jason will introduce you to a simple 5-step process that will guide your project management methodology implementation from start to finish. And because Jason has such a vast project management experience, we also wanted to know from him why it is that so many methodology implementations fail. And please give us your recommendation, Jason, on what can be done about that. Today's episode is sponsored by Project Insight, 100% web-based project management software. PMI research found that 52% of project teams are a mix of professional project managers and non-project managers. Project Insight bridges the gap with a solution that is robust enough for savvy project managers, yet easy enough for the entire team. To find out more, please visit www.projectinsight.net. We've been doing giveaways, I think, in the last 4 episodes, and today we have another announcement of the winners. In the previous episode, we gave away a copy of the professional edition of Insight Tree. If you remember, about 3 episodes ago or so, we had Oliver Lehmann on the program, and he spoke to us about the decision-making tool Insight Tree. And the winner of this one professional edition is... I'm going to mess up your name. I'm really sorry. Hijo Sebastian. He is from Edison, New Jersey in the United States. Congratulations to you. I have another gizmo for you today in just a minute, but before we get there, I have 2 very quick personal announcements for you. First of all, I am going on vacation to Switzerland, and this is the last episode until later this month. So there'll be about 2 to 3 week break starting with this episode. And second, I am now also on Twitter. Twitter is a social networking site. If you have a Twitter account, then you can follow what I do day in and day out. Just search for Cornelius Fichtner on twitter.com or go to thepmpodcast.com and you will find my Twitter link in the left-hand navigation. Looking forward to seeing you there. All right, and now for the gizmo. If you are a PMP, then you need PDUs. And one way to get these PDUs is through self-study. The PMI's Continuing Credential Program explains how self-study can be used in order to gain 15 PDUs. I found a free tool that will help you with the recording of your self-study time. And this tool is offered by Prodevia.com. And here is Ken Malden, the CEO of the company. Hello, Ken, and thank you very much for coming on the program.
Hi, thanks for having me, Cornelius.
Prodevia offers the Quick Credit PDU workbook. Why do you make that available?
We understand that our students are always looking for a variety of sources and topics to fulfill their professional development requirements, and our Quick Credit PDU workbook was designed to allow professionals to earn valuable PDUs from the time they were already spending in self-directed learning activities, such as reading their monthly PM Network magazine, for example.
Yeah, so is it just your students who should use this, or who should use the workbook, and what exactly does it help them with?
Anyone who has an interest in documenting self-directed learning activity would benefit from the workbook, as it helps to place structure around the learning event itself.
How is the workbook used?
The Quick Credit PDU workbook consists of a variety of templates to choose from that allow for the documentation of the self-directed learning activity, such as the source and title of the material, learning objectives, reader's notes, lessons learned, best practices from the activity, things like that.
Is it really necessary that I log my SDL hours? I mean, I pick up a book, I read a book, I learn about the content of the book. The learning has happened. Is it necessary for me to log my reading time?
Well, you only need to log the time when you intend to submit the activity for PDU credit. And this is both to determine the amount of PDU credit that you've earned from the activity, as well as to satisfy the documentation requirement in the event that you're audited by PMI.
So if I understand this right, then anyone can use the workbook, and it can be used to log any type of self-directed learning. For instance, listeners could use your workbook and log their listening time to the Project Management Podcast, and then claim their PDUs. Is that right?
That's correct. The template could be used for any type of self-directed learning activity, as long as it fits the 3 criteria set forth by PMI to define qualified self-directed learning. And that is, first, the activity must be relevant to project or program management. There must be a specific purpose for the learner participating in the activity. And finally, the activity must use knowledgeable resources. So any self-directed learning activity that meets these 3 criteria would be an appropriate application for the Quick Credit PDU workbook.
Excellent. Finally, of course, we need to look at this. Please tell us where the listeners can download your workbook.
Well, you can find a link to download the Quick Credit PDU workbook for free on the Prodevia Learning homepage at www.prodevia.com.
Wonderful. And of course, we will have a link to Prodevia on our website as well in the helpful resources. Wonderful. Ken, thank you very much for being on the program today. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And as always, here is our Gizmos disclaimer. We do not endorse the gizmos that we present in this segment. We just want to tell you that they exist. Use your own judgment, please. The companies and individuals who are presenting a gizmo here, they do not pay us for the privilege. And now, our main topic, the discussion about how to select and implement a PM methodology with Jason Westland. Jason Westland has a lengthy project management career. With 15 years experience managing multi-million-dollar projects, building high-growth companies and creating new project management products, he knows his stuff. He is the author of a book titled The Project Management Lifecycle, and he has overseen thousands of projects around the world. He says that his greatest challenge was managing the £1 billion strategic alignment project at British Rail. It was a huge project with tight deadlines and lots of pressure. The perfect proving ground for Method 123. So, enjoy the interview with Jason Westland.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview. Today with Jason Westland, founder of Method 123.
Hello, Jason, and welcome to the program.
Hi, Cornelius.
Well, I think it's been, 2.5 or 3 years in the making to bring you on as a guest of the Project Management Podcast. So thank you. Thank you very much for sticking with me throughout all this time here.
No problem. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, for the last 5 years, a little longer than you and I have been trying to get this interview together, the division of my former employer here in California, they have taken one attempt pretty much every year to implement a project management methodology. And this methodology, that was actually prescribed by our head office. Each of these efforts failed. They didn't fail completely because each of these attempts, something stuck. So today they're better than they were 5 years ago. But nevertheless, this example of trying to implement a prescribed methodology shows that working out the right methodology for a company that fits into the corporation, into the culture, it's difficult business. And to help our listeners, you and I we want to explore a few ways, pitfalls, tips and tricks, and how to best implement a PM methodology with a company. So let's begin very, very basic. How would you define a project management methodology, and why do we need one?
Well, Cornelius, that's a very good question. I define a methodology as a predefined set of steps that you take to deliver your project successfully. Now, the most important word in that definition is predefined. A methodology is something that's defined before you start out on your projects. Now, it doesn't need to be something that you've purchased, and it doesn't need to be from a software or a book, but it does need to set out the steps for your projects that you want to complete before you start out. So I guess one could say that it's a generic framework for managing and delivering projects that you abide by. So that's how you define a methodology, but as to why you need one, well, that's a really hard question. But to me, the answer is obvious. Ever since the pyramids were built in Egypt, projects have succeeded and they've failed. And in fact, I'm still reading statistics today saying that it's a well-known fact that 80% of projects around the world come in over budget and over time. Now, I do think that there's some truth in that, and there's a range of reasons for this, but I think that one of the most important reasons is because people approach every project differently. Now, they don't use the same formula for delivering their projects. So because they treat every project differently, whether it's in a different industry or it's more larger or smaller than the last one they managed, then it means that they often experience common problems. So this is where a methodology comes in. Now, the right methodology will give you a framework out of the box for delivering projects, and an even better methodology lets you customize it so that people can uniquely change and add processes to their methodology itself. So by adopting a methodology that's customized to a particular person's needs, then firstly, they never have to start from scratch. Secondly, they would be able to apply their learnings from past projects and take each of the elements from past projects that they know help to contribute towards success and apply it to new projects that they kick off. And the third main benefit is that the entire team knows from the outset how the project's going to be managed and what's expected of them. So because of that, then I guess you could say that a methodology, or a good one, helps people to be able to create their own formula for success and then apply that success formula over and over again to projects to help deliver them on time and under budget.
Wow, fabulous. That was probably one of the most succinct and to the point definitions of project management methodology I've heard to this point. Thank you. That is excellent.
No problem.
Now, with that out of the way, let's now work on a step-by-step process that will help me first find and then implement a good project management methodology for my company, for my culture. In fact, you yourself, you've defined such a 5-step process for this. So let's take a look at this. And let me start out with the question, what do I have to do to prepare myself before I can implement a project management methodology in my company?
Well, that's a really good question as well. I guess to answer that, it's best to go through the 5 steps. And everyone should really take these 5 steps regardless of the projects that they manage, their industry, their country, or their culture. The first step, and I guess you kind of treat it like a project, but we can talk more about this later. The first step is that you should define your methodology requirements. What is it that you need to be able to improve your project success? The second step is to identify or assess all of the existing internal methodologies within your organization, and I can describe that in a little bit more depth. The third step is to assess any external third-party methodologies that might be available that you think could be applicable to the organization you're in. And the fourth step is to evaluate creating a custom methodology instead of using the internal or external methodologies available. And then the fifth step is about implementing those. So I think if you set out from the outset those 5 steps, then you'll definitely end up implementing a solution that meets your needs.
Okay, let's look at each step a little bit more in detail. Step 1, define your methodology requirements. What criteria do you recommend that people look at when they want to define their new project management methodology?
That's another great question. There's a number of criteria that people should look at, and I have a hit list of 10 criteria that I believe that every organisation should look at when they are identifying the needs for methodology. Firstly, does the methodology fit within your existing business? So when looking at methodologies, are those methodologies likely to be in alignment with your culture, with the terminology you use, with the industry you're in? Secondly, do the methodologies you're evaluating handle projects of all sizes? So do they handle small, medium, and large projects? So are you able to, use the best elements of that methodology depending on the project you're implementing? The third criteria is that any methodologies should suit all types of projects, and unfortunately a lot of the methodologies out there are only really applicable to software projects. So if you're not in the software industry, then you really want to choose a methodology that is applicable to the types of projects you run. Just running down through the other types of criteria, obviously the methodology needs to be aligned with the processes that you have within your organization for managing things like change, risk, and issues. And methodology, if you were to adopt one, would have to come from a reputable source, so from a company with a large existing customer base. It would have to be customizable, and I can talk about this later, but being able to customize a methodology is incredibly important because no methodology out of the box is going to exactly fit a customer's requirements. Also, I would look for methodology that comes with tools to help support the implementation of projects, likes of templates, forms, checklists, guidebooks. I would also look at methodologies which are aligned with worldwide standards, likes of PMBOK and Prince2. You want a methodology that's going to be easily read and understood. And the last thing is it needs to be provided in a form that people can easily use. So whether you build your own custom methodology, you adopt one off the shelf, or you adopt one and you customize it, I do think that those 10 criteria apply to all of those different scenarios.
I assume you can simply take those 10 sample criteria that you've given, plug them into an Excel file, and you pretty much have a template, Yeah. Criteria on the left, methodologies at the top, and you go through where they meet, and you plug in yes, no, and you pretty much are able to move forward, right? Or how would you do it? How would you go through this?
Yeah, that's a good point. And what you've described there is what I'd call a gap analysis. So basically you would set out all of the criteria on the left-hand side, and then you would evaluate all of your internal methodologies and your external methodologies, and of course for each of those methodologies you would determine how well they fit with your criteria. So one thing when doing that exercise to be aware of is that, as I said before, no methodology is going to fit 100% of the project's needs. That also applies to internal methodologies as well, because internal methodologies are often created on the fly, and people change them and adopt them for every individual project. So it's very infrequent in an organization that you see a generic framework in place. So you'll probably find that out of the 10 criteria that you'll come across methodologies internally which might meet 3 to 5 of the criteria, but very infrequently would you find a methodology in place that satisfies all 10.
I believe your step 2, assess existing internal methodologies, addresses that also, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's really, really important to start with what you have internally before you look externally. Yeah. The most important reason for that is that the hardest types of projects I've ever had to manage are ones that involve change to people's roles. And you have two types of people in the world: people that love change and are inspired by change, and people that don't like change. And certainly if you start with an internal methodology using internal terminology, and I guess you look to adopt elements of those in the methodology of your strategic methodology, then of course you'll get a lot more buy-in from people internally, because immediately they'll understand the terminology used and they can relate to it because they will have used elements of it in past projects.
Moving on to step 3, which is to assess available third-party methodologies. Let's start out with the most important question. Why should I consider a third-party methodology over using or creating my own? Because you just mentioned if you use internally already existing methodologies, well, you've got the vocabulary already set, people are already comfortable with it. Why should I consider a third-party methodology?
Well, it's a really good question, and I think the answer is quite simple, and that is just that it takes a huge amount of time to be able to create a complete methodology that applies to all projects within your organization, and one that meets those 10 criteria. So it's great to be able to use existing terminology within a methodology that's used within the organization, but being able to create a methodology that applies strategically is a kind of a different kettle of fish. So, for instance, for MPMM, we had 24 man-months of writing from expert project managers in the market involved in writing the first version of the content. And that's a generic framework for implementing projects. So if you wanted to then take that and align it with worldwide standards and make sure it applied to all of your types of projects, and then add templates and examples and guides, then it really is a huge amount of work. So it's a project in its own right, and I guess the only other thing I'd say is that one thing about going external is that often and external suppliers had a number of years of experience in customizing the methodology as much as possible so that it includes best practices from around the world. So if you go with the right supplier, then hopefully you'll get all of that learning applied to your projects as well.
In step 1, we defined the methodology requirements. And now in step 3, we're assessing the available third-party methodology, which pretty much says, well, we're going through the criteria, we're looking at, does it meet this criteria, does it not meet this criteria? And of course, no third-party methodology will ever fit 100% all of my needs. So one of them will fit 70, the other one 80. How do I know that I found the right one? Where is there a method?
Well, that's a good question, and I guess I would answer it like this. I would say that looking for the perfect methodology is a bit like looking for the perfect wife. I'm sure that they exist, but it can be a hell of a long road to find one.
Yeah.
So lucky I have one. But yeah, I guess the most important thing is that you won't find a silver bullet. There is no methodology out there that you can adopt out of the box and it's going to apply to all of your projects. It's going to use exactly the same terminologies you have, and it already includes all of the templates and other tools that you need for your projects. However, I would go as far as to say this, that the best type of methodology implementations I've seen in my career, and I've been involved with quite a lot of them, probably more than a dozen, the best types are the ones where they take a third-party supplier product and they use the best practices and learning from that, and then they take their terminology and a lot of their learnings internally and they merge the two together. So what they end up with is a customized methodology within a lot shorter period of time, so that within 2 or 3 months they've got a strategic methodology that they can use for their organization, one that's based on worldwide standards, one that has got the learning of projects around the world, but one that is also customized and written in terminology that people understand within the organization. And that key to success means that people will buy into it a lot quicker, they'll understand it a lot quicker, and most importantly, of course, they're going to use it for their projects.
While we're here in step 3, assessing available third-party methodologies, let's not forget your company does have such a methodology, MPMM. So let's take a look at those criteria which you've just given us. Give me a 2-minute overview over MPMM right now here, and tell me whether it is based on an internationally accepted standard. And you also mentioned that it's very important that it's possible to customize it and make sure that your internal methodology that already exists can be merged with this third-party methodology. So let's see how MPMM stacks up against those.
Sure. MPMM stands for the Method 123 Project Management Methodology. So there is a methodology within the product that comes out of the box, but I like to think of it more as a flexible framework. It does come with more than 1,000 content pages that describe how to manage projects from end to end. So it includes a complete methodology that's more comprehensive than anything in the market already. But the most important things are that the processes included in it are already based on PMBOK and Prince2. They're perfectly aligned with it. And of course, you've mentioned the fact that it's completely customizable. So the user can go in, click on the edit button, and immediately start changing their content, the terminology used, and they can also take their existing processes in terms of Word documents and Excel files and immediately upload those into the product itself. So it's really easy to be able to create your own methodologies within MPMM and then to merge your existing methodologies with the methodology already included, so that you do end up with a strategic methodology for your organization within a lot shorter period of time, but one that is customized to your needs.
Wonderful. I think you just passed your own test. By laying out the criteria and then proving that your own methodology actually fits those criteria. Wonderful. Step 4 in the 5 steps is evaluate creation of custom methodology. Step 2 was look at what you already have internally. And step 4, of course, I assume will only be used if you find, we don't have an internal methodology yet, so let's sit down and create our own. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. When would you say is it then better to, or even required maybe, to stay internally and create your own internal methodology and not go out and purchase an MPMM or another methodology from a vendor?
I guess in my career, I've seen thousands of projects implemented, and probably 95% of those all have the same characteristics. So you're managing against time, cost, change, risks, issues, procurement, customer acceptance, and communication. So they all have those common elements, right? But there is one type of project that I've seen in my career that I know typically doesn't fit well with methodology, and that would be the type of project which is completely unique. So let me give you an example. I was involved with managing a pharmaceutical research project, and for that project they had a completely non-standard life cycle. They wanted to align with completely different industry-based standards, and they didn't need to manage the typical elements of projects that one would expect. So if you do have projects which are completely unique, bearing in mind that most projects around the world do have common characteristics, but it's in a unique field and it involves unique types of people, and there's nothing else available in the market in terms of methodologies, then it's probably a sure sign that you need to go ahead and create your own framework. And if you're going to do this, my advice would be to keep the methodology that you create as high level as possible, because the more in-depth you get, then it's going to take a lot more time. And bearing in mind that every project in this environment is completely different, then you kind of, throw out a lot of the processes at the end of it and start again. So for that type of project, I would suggest creating your own methodology because it's unique to every project you undertake.
Okay, that's a very good recommendation. So if you have something extremely unique, okay, create your own methodology. But if you're looking for a methodology that will fit, a sort of one-size-fits-all methodology for your company, for your projects, then do consider purchasing something externally. All right.
Yes.
Now I have the methodology. I've decided what I need to do, and I will need to implement the methodology in my company. But before we look at the individual steps of what I need to do to actually implement it, let's take a step back here, because I always say implementing a PMO is a project, and you should treat the implementation of a PMO in your company as a project. Would you recommend the same approach for implementing a project management methodology in a company?
Absolutely. And I think the methodology implementations that I've been involved with in my career, for the ones that have done truly well, it's been because they've been treated as a project. So they've had a project manager, they've had a sponsor, and they've had all of the characteristics that a successful project has. And let me just name a few. I guess the first thing is that any successful project is going to need buy-in. And right from the outset, from the customer, from the senior management team, and if you're implementing a methodology, then of course you're going to need a large amount of buy-in from those guys. Then, of course, you're going to want to be able to create a project plan for it, a business case, and plan the entire rollout of the project. And that same step applies to the implementation of a methodology. You communicate the methodology right across your organization, you train people, there might be consulting involved in order to customize elements of it to each department. So all of the same characteristics that you have for managing a project apply to the implementation of a methodology.
Step 5 of implementing the project management methodology at the company is, well, select and implement the methodology. And in this step here, you recommend 8 sub-steps that are needed in the process of implementing it. So let's go through them one by one, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on each one of these 8 sub-steps. The first one that you mentioned is creating an implementation plan.
Yes, that's right. An implementation plan for implementing a methodology in your organization is the type of plan that sets out what the goals and objectives are, who the stakeholders are, who the customer is, what types of communication are going to happen during the project, the timeframes, the approach that you're going to take, of course, the success criteria, and then it would list all of the activities, I guess, at a generic level, like a project plan does, that are required to be able to implement the methodology in your organization. And an implementation plan will be defined right at the outset, and it would require senior management approval before it's enacted.
And one thing that I just realized is there is an esoteric question around this problem here as well. I'm implementing a project management methodology. What project management methodology do I follow to do that? As I'm running the project to doing it. It's like, you're kind of walking in a circle. I haven't implemented it, but I have to use one to implement the one which I haven't implemented yet. Okay.
Yes, you're right. And in that example, what I would do is I would apply the unique project scenario, and I would just create a framework within the organization for doing it.
Yeah. Or you might just as well use the new project management methodology that you're planning to implement and make a case study out of it. I mean, you've got
exactly.
it. You've got it there. You know what you're going to implement. You know the templates, and hey, use them right away. Okay, that was step 1 of the 8 steps. The second step that you list is purchasing, adopting, or customizing the methodology. What happens in this step?
Okay, in this step, you've typically got a number of options. So you've created a plan which defines the steps you're going to take. The first step really is to then go out and obtain or procure the methodology. Now, I say procure in the loosest terms. Obviously, you might want to go and buy a product like MPM off the shelf and customize it. Or you might want to buy another product that happens to be in your industry that happens to have the exact terminology that you're looking for, which would be a rare thing, but it's a possibility. Or the third thing that you might need to do, of course, is to create your own methodology. So this is really the biggest step in the process. If you're creating your own, then it could be quite a lengthy project. If you're buying and customizing, it's almost guaranteed to be a lot shorter in time frame, but it will still require a lot of work. So this step involves actually obtaining the methodology and getting it ready for implementation.
Step 3, publicizing your new project methodology. What's happening in this step?
Okay, in this step, I like to tell people before they roll out a methodology to try and get buy-in from everyone who's going to use it. So communication is one of the most critical steps in implementing a methodology. If you don't have buy-in from the people that are going to be using it, then quite simply they won't use it. And as I mentioned before, a lot of people don't like change, and especially if they don't understand why they have to change their practices and what value they're going to get out of it. So the purpose of this step is really to communicate that to people. This is what we're changing, these are the reasons why, and this is the benefit you're going to get from implementing these change processes.
Step 4 is creating training courses and materials. Tell us about this.
Early on, as you're going through the implementation phase of a methodology, you really want to be able to create a training program for every person within your organization who's going to either be involved with the rollout or is actually going to use the methodology itself. So if you have train the trainers, and that means you have a person who's been trained up in every department who's going to use it, who can then train up additional people as they're employed, and every person who's using the methodology has good understanding of how to use it and why it benefits them and all of the materials that come with it and how to apply that to their projects, then you'll truly succeed. But only with good communication and great training are you going to truly allow people to have the opportunity to adopt the methodology for their projects.
Absolutely, and I think you folded step 4 and 5 into your answer right now, because step 5 is performing management and team training. So we're covered there as well.
That's right, 2 birds with 1 stone.
Always good. Moving on to step 6, which is aligning your existing projects with your new methodology. I assume you align only the new projects with your existing methodology, and you're not going to go back and say, oh, you project manager who's been working on this project for 3 years, you now got to redo all your documentation, right?
Yes. I have to say, though, that this is really the hardest step in the entire process.
Oh, okay.
Because this is the step that you're actually asking people to make changes to the way that they work. Mm-hmm. And certainly you need buy-in from the CEO of your organization or someone very high level before you take this step. And you also need to, talk to your project office if you have one about how the methodology can be enforced. But the purpose of this step is obviously to start the process of people using the new methodology that's been implemented. So to answer your question, yes, definitely implement it for all new projects. For existing projects, what I like to do is not to change the tasks on a person's project plan, but to offer the additional supportive processes around them managing their projects. So managing change and costs and issues and people, they all involve processes around the project, and a methodology will include new processes which hopefully help the project manager to do those things faster. So for projects which are already in place, I do believe that there will be elements of the methodology which will help a project manager for an existing project to deliver faster than before.
Wonderful. And we just got another 2 for 1 because step number 7, it's good. Step number 7 is using your new methodology for all new projects started. So wonderful. We got that covered in your previous answer as well. And the final step, and I think that's a very important step that gets forgotten so often when you're implementing a project management methodology in a company, that's continually revising and improving your methodology. Tell us your thoughts about this one.
Okay, well, a methodology is something in an organization that really needs to evolve as the organization changes and grows. It shouldn't be something that's left on a bookshelf or it's kept stagnant and effectively is inflexible for a project manager, because in that environment it slows the project down. I suggest that a methodology is something that is continually revised, reviewed, and updated as the best learnings from projects come through. So a project manager will constantly be giving the project office or whoever is managing the methodology feedback on which elements they found truly successful and which less successful. And that way the methodology can evolve as projects evolve, and all of those best learnings can be applied to the methodology so that within a short period of time the methodology, I guess, is optimizing the way that projects are implemented within an organization.
All right, let's do a quick review here. We have step 1, define your methodology requirements. Step 2, assess the existing internal methodologies. Step 3, assess available third-party methodologies. Step 4 was to evaluate the possible creation of your own custom internal methodology. And finally, we had step 5, select and implement the methodology with the 8 sub-steps that we just went through. Now, to you and me, this probably sounds like a rather straightforward process because we've been involved in this. So let's finish off our discussion here with the following question. I'd like to hear your opinion about why implementing a project management methodology in a company so often fails. Like in the example that I started out with my previous employer where we've done it 5 times once every year. Maybe you could also give us some tips on how to avoid the pitfalls in these projects when you implement a new methodology at a company.
Sure, I'd be happy to help out. Well, I think that there are 2 really important and popular reasons why methodology projects fail. The first is because they don't have buy-in from the outset. It's really important before you start a methodology project that the senior management team within your organization understand why it is that projects aren't truly successful, why an element of them do fail, and why a methodology is going to help them to improve their success rate. And with that buy-in, then of course it's a lot easier to enforce the methodology within the organization and also to gain support from project managers and from teams. But without that buy-in, then it makes it incredibly difficult for a methodology implementation manager to successfully do their job. The second thing that I think is quite prevalent in projects is that a lot of companies just go and buy a methodology off the shelf and say, that's it. This is the one that we're using for our organization, and try and force project managers to use it. I do maintain that no methodology out of the box is a silver bullet. None of them are a perfect wife. They might be close.
Yes, I believe you.
I really do believe... Yeah, I really do believe that customization is required in order to take a methodology that's been adopted by an organization and to be able to apply the terminology and background learning from an organization and use all of that in the methodology itself. So the 2 problems I see are that people don't have buy-in, and secondly, that they adopt a methodology straight off the shelf, and in that scenario, I think that it would be difficult to deliver a methodology project successfully. But with the reverse, with great buy-in and with the knowledge that whatever methodology you use, you're going to have to customize it, you're going to have to continually update it, then I think you've got a great chance of succeeding.
Marvelous. Well, thank you very much for those tips, and thank you very much for your time today being here on the Project Management Podcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And just a quick note to your readers, if you're looking for a customizable methodology framework, then please take a look at mpmm.com, where you can get a free trial version today.
And that was our interview with Jason Westland. Here's what I would like to know from you. What have been your greatest challenges in implementing a PM methodology? Nothing ever goes right when you're implementing a PM methodology. I know because I've done it about 3 or 4 times, and I'd like to hear your experiences. So please stop by at our website and post your experiences in regards to the challenges, the things that just go wrong when you're implementing a PM methodology, as a comment to episode 102. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at thepmpodcast.com. And if you are a PM who wants to become a PMP, you can visit pmprepcast.com. In this podcast, we teach you concepts, tools, and techniques that you need to know in order to pass the PMP exam. Please send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. In God we trust. Everyone else has to sign the project charter. Until next time.